Well, hello. My name is Martin Janssens. I am an MArch student here at the University of Texas at Austin School of Architecture. And thanks for joining me to answer a few questions as part of the Goldsmith interview series here before your lecture at the university. And before we begin, I want to mention that this is sponsored by Dean Michelle Addington. So Débora, as a partner of Ensemble, I'm sort of honored to be talking to you here because I did my undergrad in architectural engineering, and I think there's a lot of overlap there in what you're researching and studying at Ensemble. So my first question here um, is about the cross-disciplinary nature of your studio. I mean, you say that you are a cross-disciplinary studio on your website, and you actually have, I believe his name is Javier Cuesta on your team,
Mhm.
as a structural engineer. Can you sort of explain that process of bringing on structural engineering or engineering topics very early in the design process for your projects?
Yes, um, I think it all starts with the type of education that we received in Spain, in the Polytechnic University, which was a very technical education involving, yes, of course, design, but also MEP design and structural design, and actually the kind of final thesis of um, the studies, the master studies at the time was a pretty complex and well-developed project that involved all areas in surrounding architecture. And so also when we finished our studies, each of us at a different time, Anton and then Javier, he's a building engineer, or myself, we found a very fertile ground in Spain for young architects. At the time, there were open competitions that young architects could actually win without having to prove having built before X number of buildings of the same type. And so this was great because we could compete. We actually won some of these competitions. And also as licensed architects, we were responsible in Spain, not just for the design, but we were responsible for structure, mechanical systems, anything contained in the building. So this gave us the pressure to learn about all of these areas and get trained, because when we had the chance to build, we were very young still. And so, we had learned some concepts in the university, but we had to develop the rest to be able to really assume the responsibility of constructing the ideas. And this also pushed us to construction very soon, very early on, trying to build with systems or technologies that were not the conventional ones. We had to get also very involved in construction and the development of these solutions, and also sometimes assuming the liabilities and the risks in order to be able to carry out the idea. So in a way, this background in the early years of our career prepared us to operate not just as architects concerned about the design of a building, but everything surrounding it. And we cannot say we are structural engineers or mechanical engineers who can stamp plans as such, but we do understand how these disciplines affect architecture, and we design with these disciplines in mind, and we collaborate on a daily basis with engineers who are part of our team.
Yeah. Well, do you think that's something that, now that you've moved to MIT and you're stationed in Boston, I think, right, with your work there, which I think you're in the Cyclopean House, right, in Boston right now.
Yes.
Um, do you think that there is some sort of divide there between what's happening in the United States in terms of architecture and what's happening maybe in Spain or Europe?
I do think, I mean, not only I do think we've experienced completely different scenarios in Europe and in the US, although I think that in European education, a lot of the models, Anglo-Saxon models, are being imported now. So I'm not sure what's the situation of architects graduating now in Europe and in different, in Spain. But definitely the types of responsibilities and tasks that we had as architects in Spain were not at all the same ones in the US, where we found ourselves, yes, collaborating with a lot of consultants of very different kinds, some necessary, some completely unnecessary. But collaborating with them in a completely different way than what we were used to. And also relinquishing control, or we were expected to relinquish control of a lot of areas that we consider critical for an architect to be involved in. So we were more treated like design consultants rather than as architects who are able to understand and design with structural principles in mind, who are able to decide on what mechanical systems are best for a building, who can value engineer and estimate a budget for a project. All of these things, not only did we find that were not expected from us, but there was a great disconnection that created a lot of inefficiency, because we would design a project, it would be budgeted by a contractor who barely had any relevant discussions with us. A price would come up out of nowhere without the necessary understanding of the project. And so, we found ourselves in a very difficult position, which actually has pushed us to do the type of work, or to redirect our approach to architecture in the US the way we are doing now.
Yeah, and you describe a lot of that work as research, or maybe the result of research, either through large scale models or just investigation, model investigations. I can see how that would trickle down to your own work. You can say we have one test and now we know the results, so we can reuse those results or refine them in your own buildings. But I'm wondering how you think that your work described as research is affecting other architects. It's trickling down to the sort of field of architecture at large.
I don't know how it affects. I mean, for us, it's a critical way of operating. Research is a tricky word because in Spain, now things are changing, but when we were practicing there in our early years, research didn't really exist as such, especially in architecture. So, an architect practices. So it was hard to find a context that would support research. And so we had to do research in-house. And that's how we eventually developed the type of profile of an architect that we are, which has to do with reshaping our role constantly and finding the way to do the works that we want to do without caring too much about the obstacles. And then in the US, research exists and it's well funded, etc., but it's totally disconnected usually from practice. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I mean, for us, that's how we understand architecture, because we are many times looking at things that do not have a clear reference on how to do them, either because they shift from current methodologies, or because because they intend innovations, or because we have no precedents at all for them. So research becomes the way of finding the best path to accomplish a certain idea, to develop a topic and an investigation. But there's always a very practical approach to the research that we do. I don't know how it affects others. Probably doesn't affect many others, but for us it's just critical. It's the way of always finding a path to do the things that we want to do and get trained, because many times you have a client that commissions a work, and if you want to do things differently, you have to demonstrate some capacity to do it. And the way in which we find, or we can prove this, is to develop the research, prototype our ideas, and get ourselves trained into how to develop and realize them. I cannot say we found great research models, neither in Spain, or frameworks, better say, neither in Spain or in the US, in terms of really combining research and practice, or enabling, because there's usually a conflict of interest that it's called, for instance, in universities, where an architect in practice, to become a researcher, it's not clear at all how ideas are transferred from practice to research in academia, and from research into practice outside of academia. So I think this is a pending lesson, because for us it's clear research, especially in the type of world that we live today, where we need a lot of actions, important actions to make it outside the boundaries of academia. There needs to be a very strong and direct connection without these conflicts. So, but we haven't found them. So far, the best way, or we found more freedom in research and more capacity to translate research into practice when doing it in-house.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you answered some other questions that I had there, so thanks for the thorough answer on that. I don't want to keep you from your lecture, so I'll try and end on maybe how you describe Ensemble Studio and the work that you do there. On your website, you have a manifesto there with a few points. I think it's 7 points, and they are very not manifesto-y in a sense. They're very different than something like, I think, Cool House's Delirious New York, or even Corbusier's, Veron Architect. How has that manifesto changed over the years? Do you sort of add addendums to it, or do you try and stick, to those 7 points that you set out for yourself?
I think they haven't changed much. They're broad enough, I think, and they cover a wide range of areas that we find important, that have to do with from understanding and reading and looking at history in a very active way, which implies the need to know about what has been done, how it has been done, and how it can be continued. And I think this is present a lot in our works, the ones that operate in very historic contexts and the ones that do not. To the need to balance, art, science, and the the aim of achieving freedom and balancing imagination and reality. I think that was part of how we started, and that's how we've continued. It's not something that we that we read every day, and we need to check whether it still fits as well. But the fact is that I think it defines how we operate, and that's something that has not changed. If anything, it has radicalized more and more throughout the years. So I think the manifesto continues to be pertinent today, and we haven't changed it, but we don't either look at it too much.
Yeah. Well, Débora, Mesa, thank you so much for joining me, answering some of my questions. And I'm looking at the models behind you, and I'm hoping you're going to present some of those projects today. So I'm looking forward to your lecture as part of the lecture series here at UT. So once again, thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully we'll talk again later.
Thank you for your questions and your time.
Bye.
See you now. Bye.